Hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner, and we're here in Austin, Texas at the Big 5G event, and I'm joined by uh, Randy Levensalor with CableLabs. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So here at Big 5G, your keynote is going to focus on wireline wireless convergence and the idea of extending O-RAN to the wireline network, right? Yeah. So before we dig into that, specifically, I mean, how is convergence kind of taking shape within the cable industry? Is it more about straight up services now, or are we down to the network layer and able to kind of mesh all that together?
Yeah, so we're seeing convergence in the cable space rolling out over kind of three major phases. Where today we're using a lot of BNGs, which are already in the market, a lot of kind of over-the-top solutions where things like mobile speed boost can be delivered as an overlay. So that's where a customer who may be a mobile customer and a broadband customer can get a enhanced wireless Wi-Fi experience when they're roaming. So you can get your friend's house or at the coffee shop, and you can actually bring your key services with you. Then over the next year, we see kind of the AGF or the access gateway function rolling out, and that's really going to bring in a lot more of that tighter integration with the 5G core. As with the BNG, we're really limited into that integration. There's some proxying and authentication with the 5G core, but you don't really have that tight control. And there's also some interfaces that haven't quite been defined yet with DOCSIS.
Okay, so there's kind of an evolution then, I guess, to it. Definitely like kind of a step-by-step way to whatever convergence is going to be down the road, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you said DOCSIS, though, so are there going to be some extensions of DOCSIS to kind of help that out, or what can you say about that right now?
We're looking at that right now. We've actually kicked off what we're calling our phase 2 working group, and we started this with a member-only working group just to kind of scope it out and see what are the goals, new services, improve customer experience, as well as efficiencies.
Yeah, but it has convergence in mind, or is that?
Yeah, this is all focused around convergence.
Okay.
And so we're going to be bringing in the vendors and start trying to figure out what is the best solution.
Okay.
How tight does the integration go? Do we need to extend the access gateway function? Do we extend something like the CMTS or an OLT for the PON networks? So some of that we're still working through. I suspect it's going to be fairly minimal impact on the broadband networks. And we've gotten, especially in kind of some of the more recent 5G specifications, a lot of the wireline access. So it's really going to be kind of filling in a few gaps here and there, and as we do some trials and start bringing in more use cases.
Okay, great. And then I was wondering if you can, because we were talking up front, you're going to be talking a lot about O-RAN here at the show, right? So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on the advantages of extending O-RAN into the wireline network and how that fits into the future of this converged network?
Yeah, and some of that's a little further out, so we're starting to look at it now because it's going to involve so many specifications coming together. But if you take a step back and you look at what is an access network, be it 5G, PON, DOCSIS, even satellite, it's a lot of the same attributes. So you're scheduling frequencies or wavelengths, you need to manage power. And so over time, we want to get that so you can actually, rather than having these shim layers like the AGF or BNG today for wireline convergence, you can actually have that convergence go all the way down to the control unit or the CU in the RAN. And then as we expose these interfaces, you can do the O2 interface for orchestration, as well as, and this is where we think we'll get a lot of value, exposing the interfaces to the RIC, the near real-time RIC and the non-real-time RIC. So you'll be able to apply a lot of these X apps and R apps and start being able to use that to not just manage your wireline network, but manage not just your wireless, but manage your wireline as well.
All right.
So we think that's going to be really interesting, especially if you'll have these hybrid networks where you'll have wireline network as the backhaul for a wireless network that then connects to fixed wireless to a Wi-Fi network. And if you can really start having a single view of these, pulling out all that telemetry, kind of taking some what cable's done with network maintenance, P&M, and applying that broadly across all the networks.
Yeah, well, it seems like overall with like convergence, there's definitely like this this breaking down of silos, right? A lot of blurring of lines, because it used to
Yes.
be, oh, okay, we're in the wireline world, but it just feels like everything's like so cross industry now.
Yeah.
So you guys, so CableLabs is working with a lot of other organizations. Are working with you because I think, you definitely have to find your kind of cohesive, connection points,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, so we work with 3GPP, with
Yeah.
TIP, with Broadband Forum, and other
Mhm.
standards organizations outside the cable space.
Okay. And I think you kind of touched on this. Maybe elaborate a little bit on, how how do you see cable, integrating ORAN interfaces, right? You did talk a little
Right.
bit about it.
Yeah, so definitely. So we really want to have those. So if you really step back and squint a little bit at the DU or distributed unit in ORAN, it's a lot like a CMTS minus a couple capabilities or an OLT in the PON network. So we can actually start bringing those interfaces in between the CU and DU for both the control plane and user plane. We can then leverage more of that integration. So we're going to go beyond just sharing users and having a single user backend to being able to coordinate and steer traffic. So one example is right now, if you say have a wireline network and a backup 5G network, well, when you transition over, you're going to have to restart all of your sessions because you're going to have a new IP address. You have to reestablish your layer 2, layer 3 security from your gateway to that network. With convergence, it'll just shift over seamlessly like you're going from one tower to the other. So this will really give us that seamless transition. And then once you have that in place, you can actually start doing steering and traffic balancing. So if one network's loaded and the other one's not at a certain time of day, you can switch it, or you have different traffic profiles. You can use the best or even route traffic for one session over both networks.
Yeah. Well, it feels like one idea, at a higher level is kind of like we're trying to streamline and simplify the way that people are getting connected,
Right.
through this converged network and having converged services. But, for the cable industry, I mean, what was kind of, do you think is like the biggest challenge for them to achieve this? Because it feels like, hey, there's a lot for them to learn, and that they are definitely, the industry is definitely broadening its scope in terms of its expertise and its focus and so forth. But if you had to boil it down, what's the biggest challenge for them right now?
And some of that depends on the region and the model. If look
Okay.
internationally, more of our members are MNOs, so they actually are already managing their own core. In the US, we have a lot more of the MVNO model where they're actually using the mobile operator's core. So then can we look at bringing in some more of those core functionality into the MVNO, or do we increase that reliance on that MNO partner? So I think that's one of the things where the interfaces are defined and there are several models that would work, but trying to find that right model there and that right business model is going to be critical.
Okay. Well, CableLabs, you do a lot of work in the lab, right? And it's a huge lab. So, what kind of work have you been doing with respect to convergence? When you're looking at 5G, the HFC plant, they're getting into PON and
Yeah.
greenfields, and some of the rural build outs and everything. So what are you doing there at the facilities in Colorado?
Yeah. So we have what we call our 10G lab, which really brings multiple subject matters together. And within it, we have multiple mobile cores, multiple RAN and ORAN networks, as well as PON and multiple DOCSIS networks. So one demo we did last year we highlighted at SCTE Tech Expo, working with CASA, and Intel, Red Hat, and a few other vendors, as well as our members, were able to show speed boost over PON, DOCSIS, and 5G. So one single API call to what we call our network exposure layer, and we're able to change the service based on the user, be that user had DOCSIS and 5G or PON and 5G. So
Versus just like Wi-Fi only or something.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
So for that backhaul network, and so it was like fixed
Okay.
wireless access for 5G and DOCSIS. So that way you actually have that follow you. So when you get that service, it's not like, well, I want this on my DOCSIS or PON, or what kind of network am I? Right?
Right.
Most people don't know what network they're.
They probably don't want to know, right? I mean, none of
Exactly.
it's like as long as it's working, I don't really care. Yeah, kind of what's happening, it's kind of below everything. But you're doing the 10G lab, doing a lot of important work there. But kind of going forward, what do you kind of see as CableLabs' big role in this, right? Because I think in the past it was pretty clear. There was DOCSIS, and you're doing certification, you're doing qualification for things like modems and gateways and CMTSs. And this is a much bigger picture. So I imagine you're not doing that kind of testing, but is it like interops, or just to make sure that everything's going to work together, give the operators kind of a some guidelines or a way to go?
So we still have a lot of those activities going on around with 5G interops. We have a few other 5G chows. I'm sure you'll hear more about that later.
Yeah.
But for us, one of the things I'm focusing a lot is actually these proof of concepts, is to show what does it look like when all these pieces come together, what does it look like with a multi-vendor solution, and then actually exercise a lot of these use cases before our members do it in trials. Because not everyone has DOCSIS, PON, and 5G all in the same environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always as easy as you might think to get it all.
I know it's not easy, yeah.
So getting it up, tuning it,
Yeah.
and configuring a lot of the low latency and different cost profiles across those. So really, that's one of our great abilities, right? Is we can bring together our members as well as a broad vendor ecosystem to do this. And we're always building and extending and bringing more vendors and more members into these projects.
Okay. Well, last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I think this is another element of your keynote, is edge compute, right? And it's something we've talked about a lot. And we are seeing the cable network, the HFC network, become distributed. The nodes are a lot smarter. There's gap nodes. You can do a lot of things out there. So I guess, what are you going to be talking about here about edge compute, and how does that apply to the cable industry, and what can they do with edge compute that I imagine is the same with a lot of folks, but what kind of opportunities are there?
Yeah, well, so with DOCSIS 4.0 and 5G, more and more of these components are virtualized. So we're already putting servers in head ends, in nodes, on the customer premises. So we want to see what else can we do. Are there other workloads we can run there? And can we make this a unified experience? You don't want to have to certify your application against every cable operator, every telco operator around the world. Mm-hmm. One of the areas we're working with on that is Camara, which is an open source project focusing on intent-based APIs. So we have been pushing in some changes to do service provider defined quality of service. And then there's some edge compute work we're looking at there as well, where you kind of need those two together. One very specific use case is if you look at split rendering for XR applications, that needs to be 20 milliseconds or less, otherwise people start getting queasy. Mm-hmm. And 8 or 10 milliseconds of that can be taken up with the rendering.
Okay.
And the encoding and decoding on both ends. So you really need this low jitter, high reliability, low latency network to provide that experience. Otherwise, everyone's going to have to start getting these $10,000 goggles to render everything with a 5-minute battery life. And really, we all
that's not very scalable, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want cheap goggles with long battery life, and let someone else deal with all those GPUs and compute.
Okay. Great examples. Okay, well, thanks for walking through. You got a lot on your plate, but we appreciate you coming here and joining us at the Big 5G event, Randy.
Well, thanks. This was fun.
All right, thank you.
Well, enjoy.